These comedies, man, they just continue to surprise us this year. Ted is the feature film debut of Seth MacFarlane, the famed creator of the hit Fox anime comedy series Family Guy, American Dad, and The Cleveland Show. While not being the biggest fan of those three shows, I do like Family Guy the most, so I'm not a massive diehard fanboy of the show. Specifically, I prefer the earlier seasons more of the show, and the past seasons really, I don't really watch the episodes at all because they've just become very repetitive, but I do prefer the old episodes of where it wasn't entirely relying on the pop culture references and had its own form of humor to also carry on from it and further. In the film, MacFarlane directs, co-writes, and stars as the voice of Ted, a teddy bear who becomes the best friend of a young boy named John when he was 8 years old, but fast forward to 27 years later where the adult version of John is a slacker and he's played by Mark Wahlberg, and Ted has become a drug-addicted, beer-drinking, very crude and rude teddy bear that's still his sidekick, and he's voiced by Seth MacFarlane, of course, in which he's essentially Peter Griffin if he was a Bostonian. However, Ted's antics really start to get on the nerves of John's girlfriend Lori, played by Mila Kunis, and it comes to the point where Lori wants John to finally mature into adulthood, which he hasn't for the past few years which they've been dating, and also to get Ted to move out on his own in order to live life on his own for the rest of his life. Now, I was initially skeptical going into Ted because I just had that tick in the back of my head of how long can you really keep the joke running of a walking, talking, crude, drug-addicted teddy bear, and how much you can really do with that in the process. But I have to say that in the end, and even for not being the biggest Seth MacFarlane fan out there, this was one of the funniest movies of the year without a doubt. Seth MacFarlane and his co-writers, who also write for Family Guy and a few other of his shows as well, they both add on a surprisingly amount of humor to this movie. A lot of it is very Family Guy-esque considering the pop culture references, the several cutaway gags, and also with the racial stereotypes and very crude dialogue at times. It all meshes together so well, and especially the pop culture references, because they all have a very biting comedic delivery, both within the writing and the actors delivering the lines, and it all just meshes together so well. I found myself laughing throughout this movie, consistently, almost every minute, no matter what kind of joke was being spewed out of whatever character's mouths. I just had a blast with it. However, if you're not a Family Guy fan, or let alone a fan of MacFarlane's brand of humor, you can probably only take so much of it, but being that I am a fan, I sure got a huge kick out of it. In terms of acting, I think Mark Wahlberg and Mila Kunis both have really good chemistry with each other, and their comedic banter between each other is very solid, but MacFarlane, of course, steals the show as Ted because of his voice, for one, which, as I said, is a cross between Peter Griffin if he was a Bostonian, and his comedic delivery, of course, is great as usual, but I really like the featurettes that showed how MacFarlane conveyed his performance, not just within the voice, but also how he did the motion capture of all of Ted's body movements, because Ted is a character that had to be completely animated in the scene. And with the fact that these two lead actors had to interact with that, I both thought that they enhanced their performances even more by doing that too. The supporting cast has some big names in there, like Joel McHale from Community, who's one of my favorite people in America without a doubt, and also Giovanni Ribisi, who plays a character that has the same name as the one he played in My Name is Earl. However, he's much more of a creepy version, let alone from that one. And they both do a decent job, even though they're not given really a lot to work with. And I was kind of disappointed with Joel McHale specifically because he's one of my favorite comedians working today. But they both do good with what they're given, though. As a first-time film director and feature-length film writer, Seth MacFarlane does a pretty good job with this film, as I said, specifically within the writing of the jokes. However, I can tell that his specific purpose for making this movie was just to make people laugh. And you can see the flaw in his directing towards the end, in which everything just has to get serious because he knows he has to wrap up the story. However, I don't really blame him for that because nearly every comedy made these days has to utilize that factor in order to wrap things up. I mean, not every comedy does have to do that, but the one specifically following this formula have to. But I have to say that MacFarlane netted down a very solid debut within those benefactors, and I'm really looking forward to what he could do in the future with the rest of his expertise in feature-length filmmaking, because he certainly did a great job with this. As much as I really enjoy this movie, there are a few jokes that do fall flat, specifically the Thunder Buddy song. For some reason, I just found that to be too childish for my own taste. The third act gets very serious in parts, and it takes away from the existence of the comedy being present on scene. But otherwise, besides those minor flaws, Ted is still a hilarious film, and I'm really looking forward to what Seth MacFarlane's going to bring us in the future, if this is his debut, of course. So if you're a Family Guy, or let alone a fan of any of MacFarlane's work, and even his roast mastering Comedy Central. I mean, who does not love that? I sure do. I really had a blast with this film, but go into this movie with an open mind if you're not a fan of his work, and it may surprise you, who knows. But I'm going to give Ted 4 out of 5 stars. So I hope you enjoyed my review of Ted. You can find my written review on my website, CaliCritic.blogspot.com. The link is below if you want to check it out. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, and also subscribe to the Film Freaks podcast. All those links are below in the description. And also, my review, The Secret of Friend for the End of the World, got pushed, of course, but you can find it on the latest episode of the Movie Files podcast that I did with Jordan Rowe and Charlie Morris from GrowNet and Not Charles Morris. I'll put a link to that below in the description as well. So in the meantime, I'm Tyler from CaliCritic Reviews, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.